All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Before we dive into ACE's numbers, I want to do some poll construction questions first. The 2nd District typically skews Pulaski County about 52%, the rest of the counties in the district, another 48%. Jay, I want you to describe kind of the role of how Republicans have managed to win in what has been once a solidly Democratic district.
Yeah, and at the congressional level and at the presidential level, Democrats win Pulaski County, sometimes quite easily. But it really has been blowouts in the donut of counties around Pulaski County that has overwhelmed Democrat support in the capital county, and so that's kind of been the norm for the last really probably 10 years. 10 to 12 years since the beginning of the Obama era. That's really been the norm in the 2nd District.
All right, Robert, we added an education question to our poll this time around to gauge if people are college educated or not college educated. Tell viewers and listeners why we've added that as a component in this particular poll and how we kind of set our baseline of what we did.
Voters by college degree has kind of been a thing that's emerged over the last 4 years. It was something that was kind of missed in 2016, and part of the reason why some of the polling didn't reflect Trump's strength. In order to best capture the mood of the electorate, you have to adjust for what the actual voter education level is that turns out, and so we worked to make that adjustment in this poll to make sure that it was reflective. The data that's out there shows that somewhere between 34 and 36% of Arkansas voters on a statewide level have a college degree that actually vote. So it's different than just the population that has a degree. And so in this 2nd congressional district, it kind of leans a little bit more on the college educated demographic. And so we wanted to make sure that was reflective. So that's kind of where that came in.
Yeah, and our number is 40% on that, as I mentioned earlier there.
Right.
All right, to both of you guys, and Jay, I'll let you take first swing at this. Asa Hutchinson doing very well in this 2nd congressional district poll, 70%, about 36% strongly approve of the job he's doing, 34% somewhat approve of the job he's doing. His negatives have gone up a little bit from the statewide poll we did in June from 19 to 26, but still, he's doing well in just about every demographic here. Asa Hutchinson's going to sleep pretty well tonight with these numbers, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it's the most Democratic district in the state, and the fact that he's running so well in this district suggests that he's in very good shape statewide, that he's really weathered this pretty severe test of his governorship, the COVID pandemic. And, a lot of governors around the country, while they started off pretty strongly, have really had some challenges as the pandemic has gone on. Governor Hutchinson doing quite well. He does, as you should say, really across demographics, he is in strong shape. There's sometimes some subtle differences with certain demographics, such as women. While there's overall approval, it's a little bit it's more likely to be in the somewhat approved rather than the strongly approved, while men are more strongly approved. And we do see that in a few spots, that there's a little softening with certain groups, but all in all, a very, very, very strong performance for the governor.
Yeah, Robert, your take.
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing that stands out is even though there's some softness among women, there's some softness among Democrats. They're still siding on, the approval, side of the coin rather than disapprove. And, the governor's taken a lot of shots from people on the right about his handling of the pandemic and the emergency extensions. He's taken hits from the left over schools and things like that. And his desire to see, in-class education go on. And so it's specifically notable that even in Pulaski County, his figures are 65% approved, where that's been ground zero for a lot of those education issues.
This question for both of you too. Robert, I'll let you swing first at this one too. Do you think Asa Hutchinson's brand has transcended partisan politics, much like we saw Mike Beebe's brand, particularly in the later years of his governorship? He enjoyed widespread support across so many different demographics. Do you think Asa's brand has got its own kind of political identity in Arkansas now?
I think it does now. I think the Governor Beebe is a great analogy there. I think what you've seen is you've got a governor that kind of crosses traditional party lines. That's why he has support from Republicans and Democrats and independents. He takes a measured approach to his leadership style, and he's not out there just trying to, saber rattle or something like that. So I think he's established himself as someone that the broader electorate can kind of look to and feel comfortable with.
Your take on that question?
Yeah, I think the other thing is he's become much more high profile over since March. I mean, obviously with the daily press conferences that have, they're on every TV station, state TV station. He is the front picture on the newspaper, the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, most days now. Before this period, Asa Hutchinson, while popular, was somewhat kind of low key and low profile. Now he's still pretty low key, and I think that actually serves him well, especially in contrast to President Trump. But he is much higher profile as a result of the last few months.
So Jay has given us the perfect segue to our next question. Let's go Trump versus Biden in the 2nd Congressional District. I want to really make sure that, viewers and listeners are clear on this. This is not a statewide reflection. This is the 2nd Congressional District of Arkansas, the 7 counties in central Arkansas. Biden at 49%, Trump at 45%. This is a district that Hillary Clinton lost by 11 points in 2016. So it's a 15-point swing. Jay, what has changed in 4 years?
Well, I think the biggest thing that has changed is outside of Pulaski County. I mean, Pulaski County, I think, looks much more similar to 2016. Although I do think there are probably some more suburbanized parts of Pulaski County that have turned against Trump, such as West Little Rock, parts of north of the river. But the big change has really been in those couple of counties that are closest to Pulaski County, where many folks who live in those counties actually work in Little Rock. And so that's Faulkner County and that's Saline County. We're now seeing, Vice President Biden still getting beat, but he's now into the mid to high 30s in those counties. That's some big shifts, and now he's still running incredibly well out in the most rural 4 counties of the district. But we're starting to begin to see some of those close-in counties really become more like true suburbs rather than exurbs. The way that White County, for instance, is, where folks don't really spend that much time in the central city of Little Rock.
Robert, how about you? What do you think has changed in 4 years that has made this district different than Trump versus Hillary Clinton and now Trump versus Biden?
Well, I have to agree with Jay. I think Biden's competitiveness outside of Pulaski County is a key part of why these numbers are where they are. I think the other areas that you have to look at, he's leading with every age group except for 65 plus, and for the under 30 crowd and the 30 to 44s, you're talking about leads of 11 to 12 points. Those are significant. I think the biggest thing though is that's different, particularly from 4 years ago, is Biden is getting 56% of women, and women are slightly more apt to vote than men, and so when you're taking a larger share of that group, you're getting a larger share of the vote. I think that the gap that is formed on Donald Trump with a lot of women, particularly as Jay's noted, suburban women, is an area that is a problem, and it's a national trend, and we're seeing it not just in Arkansas.
Yeah, well, you just made the point that I wanted to segue to. What are we seeing nationally, and how does what we're seeing in Arkansas reflect what we're seeing nationally? Robert, I'll let you pick up on that thread.
Yeah, nationally, I mean, you're seeing kind of a little bit of an erosion of women and independents towards the Republican candidates. A lot of it's being driven, from it being a more nationalized election with Donald Trump on the ballot, and that's kind of driving it downward. Trump in this survey, both candidates are getting their base. He's getting the lion's share of Republicans. Biden's getting the lion's share of Democrats. Trump has a slight lead with independents, about 3 percentage points. But if you're the typical Republican formula for winning has been, getting a much bigger share of independents. Independents have traditionally been, in Arkansas at least, lining up with Republican candidates, and to have a 3-point gap with independents right now should be a little bit scary.
Yeah, 2-1, 3-1. We've seen in a lot of polling, even sometimes bigger than that in the early part of the decade. How about you, Jay? What do you see nationally? What do you see reflected in these these second district numbers?
Well, I think gender, education, and geography. Where folks live. Do they live in the suburbs or in the core city? Do they have higher education levels? That tends to skew Biden, and then gender, a clearly defining force. Adding to some of the more traditional sources of explaining the vote, such as race and ethnicity, and some other things that have been around for a while. I think the other thing on the partisan front, I think it's important to note that many of those folks who maybe 12 years ago would have called themselves independents in Arkansas, they've really moved to the Republican camp. And so what we have in the independent group are really kind of more pure independents, many of them younger, who have yet to kind of maybe are pretty turned off to partisan politics. I think that's really changed the game in terms of how independents behave in politics.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right. Now the big one. Incumbent Republican Congressman French Hill, 47.5% in our poll. Democratic challenger State Senator Joyce Elliott, 46%, 6.5% undecided at this point in time. Let's get past the shock that we are going to hear from that number one. And to both of you, Jay, I'll come to you first. Why is this race tight?
It is a race that is completely tethered to the presidential race. And there's a little bit of a difference. As you see, Biden's ahead in the presidential race. Elliott is slightly behind in the congressional race. But when you look at all the demographics, all the subgroups, they look very much like the presidential race. And I think that Congressman Hill has not disconnected himself from President Trump. And indeed, I think in some ways just the opposite of some of his campaign ads so far. For instance, attacking China, very much kind of, while he has a very different style than President Trump, and we've got to emphasize that, I think on the issues, he's really kind of connected himself to President Trump, and therefore we have kind of a replication of the presidential level down at the congressional level. I think it is surprising, but it makes sense when you think about how nationalized this all politics is, and all politics really goes back to a reflection on President Trump.
Robert, why do you think this race is so tight?
Well, I do think it is a nationalized race. You've got, I think, French Hill suffering some because of Joe Biden's success in the outlying counties in this poll. And again, success being approaching 40%. He's not winning them, but he's much more competitive. This poll shows that 61% is where French Hill stands in the non-Pulaski counties. He got 67% of that vote in 2018, so that's a 6-point gap for where he was 2 years ago. I do think that like Jay said, Senator Elliott is some of her numbers mirror Joe Biden's numbers, especially in places like Faulkner County and Saline County, 39%. 38%. That's extraordinarily high for historically in the past, 10 years, what Democrats have gotten in those counties. And while, I think the Biden effect has a lot to do here, I think Senator Elliott deserves some credit for kind of the messaging that she's been pushing about education and about healthcare, her recent TV ads, because they are, at least they appear to me, to be targeting those demographic groups that are persuadable, that are kind of not locked in for the Republican candidate. Your women, your independents, they seem to be, messaging that is playing towards that strength and trying to grow that share. Those are suburban issues. Those are things that suburban voters care about. And so, kudos to her for kind of zeroing in on those. I think, there's a undecided vote that's still out there and up for grabs. And I think that that's a big part of it.
Well, let's hit that right now and stay with you, Robert, on this one. Where is the swing group in this race right now, and kind of what are some of the characteristics that define it?
Well, 7%, roughly 6.5% say they're undecided. They're mostly younger in the under 30 crowd and the 30 to 44 age demographic. They're not traditionally Republican. 8% of independents are undecided. 29% of people that say there's something else other than a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent are undecided. They're predominantly female. 9% of women are undecided in this race compared to, I think, 3 or 4% of men. And then a lot of them are in Pulaski County. If you look at the breakdown for, where they live, a lot of those outlying counties are kind of already locked in, or at least, there's not that many undecideds. 8% of Pulaski County is undecided. So younger, more independent, more female, and in Pulaski County. And that's, those become the numbers that you're fighting for to try to break 50.
And Jay, you may just reinforce what Robert just said there, but when you're looking at it, where do you think the persuadables are in this race?
I think Robert captured that pretty well. I do think that Senator Elliott does have a little room to grow in Pulaski County, and I think that this in the stretch run, of course, like all races, will become a turnout race. But she really does need to get numbers similar to those that Representative Clark Tucker got 2 years ago, and maybe grow on that just a little bit in Pulaski County. And she's got to withstand what are probably going to be some pretty ferocious attacks via TV and other modes. I do think a really crucial point that Robert hit earlier that I think is important to note, this notion of running as a public school teacher and an advocate for public schools out in the suburbs in particular. Public schools are the central core of those communities, and there is a deep dedication to public education. And I think she's found an issue there that is basically her life that she's emphasizing, and it's really I think working for her in terms of keeping things as close as they are.
What do you know about education? You're just a former professor, state education board member, and a chief education officer for the city of Little Rock. So good points there. I do want to say too, just you guys both touched on the coattails of Joe Biden and how Senator Elliott has run her campaign so far. I think the other kind of big variable in all of this is that Trump is a drag right now on the Republicans, at least in this congressional district race. And you can't control him, and you're not going to really know what's going to come out of his mouth on a daily basis. So, Robert, maybe I'll let you tackle this first. Where does the Trump factor play into all this? Could French Hill run a perfect campaign between now and Election Day, and Trump derail him somehow?
I think that French Hill is going to be a victim of Donald Trump regardless. And honestly, I think a lot of that damage is pretty much already done. Donald Trump and his antics are well known. I don't think that there's going to be anything that's really going to surprise anybody anymore. I think if you're the Hill campaign, you've got to look at the demographics that you're down with. You got to look at who's left that's undecided, your women, your independents, the suburban counties where you need to be back up at 67% and not at 61%. And I think, French Hill needs to be focused on how do I engage those people on the issues that they care about. Donald Trump's going to talk about what Donald Trump's going to talk about, but those people need to hear that you care about the issues that are important to them. And I think that is the solution to trying to, him get over the finish line.
Yeah. Jay?
Well, I'll just, I was thinking, Roby, we've been doing this 10 years. This is 10 years of polling for us. And the first election we did was 2010. It was an election that where there were a lot of jolts with the recent past in Arkansas politics. This feels like another jolt election because of the evaluation of the incumbent president, much as that of course was a rejection of President Obama in the state. I'm super eager to see some statewide numbers, especially to see in the 3rd district in particular, the areas up there. Are we starting to see some of these same tides up there? Or is this very much a Little Rock centric issue because of the unique demographics in this district?
Well, we'll be doing some statewide polling in early October there. Last question for you. I'll go Robert first, and then I'll let Jay close it out. As Jay mentioned, we've been doing these polls for 10 years now. It's been a decade of polling here, and we've gotten a heck of a lot more right than we have gotten wrong, that's for sure. But there are going to be skeptics out there about this poll and its results. You got Asa Hutchinson at 70%, and you basically got a neck and neck race for the congressional race here, and Biden up, at least in this congressional district. Why should people trust this poll, Robert?
Well, I think the fundamentals of this poll are completely solid, and I think that's where you have to start. It's reflective of the voter turnout in this district from an age standpoint, from a gender standpoint, from a county standpoint, and we've even taken the step to make sure that it reflects what the education level is of these voters are, because honestly, that does make a difference, and that is something that has been shown to move Donald Trump's numbers up, several points, and I think that is something that has to be recognized. I think you have to look at the fundamentals of the poll, and the questions obviously are out there. There's nothing magic about them. For me, the Asa Hutchinson number is a huge barometer. It's consistent with kind of his statewide numbers, and I think that's another just kind of validation to where these numbers are coming from.
Yeah, Jay, last word.
I think I wanted to emphasize that last point. I mean, the way in which Governor Hutchinson is really flying high, much like Governor Beebe did, even while things were going south for his party at other levels. He was flying high, and I think we're seeing that still persisting here during these challenging times. I think the other thing to watch moving forward, obviously, Senator Elliott has fundraised well. The questions are, does she continue to have an advantage in fundraising that allows her to continue to get her message out? And the other question is, what outside groups get involved in this race down the stretch run? Because Senator Elliott has a long record in public life, and therefore long records are voting records, and there clearly are things to go after, and that will be interesting to see if there is money on the other side to really take full advantage of that.
To say that this race is going to heat up is an understatement, gentlemen. I appreciate y'all's insight and attention on this poll. It is always great working with y'all, and I really appreciate y'all being here today.
Thank you.